Welcome to Bombast. Today we're joined by Professor Dr. Houshang Amirahmadi, one of the most respected scholars on Iranian political economy and international relations, to analyze a rapidly evolving set of developments shaping Iran's domestic politics and foreign policy with the United States. Over the last several months, tensions between Tehran and Washington have surged. The U.S. military shot down an Iranian drone near a U.S. aircraft carrier. Tehran signaled cautious readiness for indirect talks mediated through Oman through back and forth negotiations, and widespread protests within Iran have been met with one of the deadliest crackdowns in decades, with independent estimates putting the death toll in the tens of thousands of protesters. Meanwhile, Iranian state narrative and foreign policy analysis frame a complex interplay of military pressure, diplomatic maneuvering, and internal regime survival strategies. Against this backdrop, spanning domestic legitimacy crisis, regional power dynamics, and potential U.S. escalation options, we explore where Iranian policy and global reactions are headed. With that context, Professor Amirahmadi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Manzarpour, and I send regards to you and for the Iranian people. Hope all is well with all of you.
I'm going to start with the foreign policy article. The article discusses how recent military incidents, like the US shooting down of a drone, and strategic options available to Washington could influence escalation or diplomacy. In your view, what are the most credible US strategic options on the table regarding Iran, ranging from further military pressure to negotiated settlements? And how realistic is a de escalation if pressure intensifies?
Yes, first, obviously, US's strategic interest in Iran or its aim for whatever it wants from Iran, it just cannot be military. Military sanctions and all of this are tools toward a purpose. So the first question really is, what is the America's purpose when it comes to Iran? What it is that the US really wants or should want in this particular case? What outcome it really at the end of the day US wants, you could say the US is just interested in destroying the country, weakening the regime, ask for certain concessions, and then go home. And is that really the end game for the US? Or US does or should have another more strategic purpose in relation to Iran? Of course, I think using just military or sanction doesn't really do much for the American interest. It destroys the other side, yeah, but it doesn't gain anything in this side. The purpose is to gain as opposed to just make the other side lose. So, in my view, the US's, of course, strategic aim should be to get Iran in its side as a friend, just like it was before the war, before the revolution. As a friend that will, next to it, does whatever that it should do in the best interest of both nations and help the US's economy grow, help its own economy grow, help the American people become more prosperous and have the Iranian people become more prosperous, as opposed to just thinking in terms of, destroying this side and how much, or that side and how much. That means the US's strategic interest has to be designed toward Iran in gaining that country back to its side. That means really establishing diplomatic relations. That means establishing trade relations. That means establishing geopolitical relations that will serve both sides. And so the question really is if that should be the aim or the name of the US game in relation to Iran, then what it takes to achieve it. As I said, you will not achieve it through war. You could destroy Iran, weaken the country. You cannot achieve it through sanctions, as the last 40 some years have proven. It just doesn't. So, nor does, from the Iran side, it works the way the regime has tried to approach the US through animosity, anti-Americanism, and the rest of it. So I think in both nations, in both capitals, the voices of reason have to speak out to become louder and stronger versus the voices of war, sanctions, threats, and so on. I think that's where I would. So I would design, if I was the US, a strategy that would achieve that aim. The aim of normalization of relationship, of establishing diplomatic ties, and of course, from there, establishing economic relations and so on. Of course, on both sides, there are tremendous sort of like backlogs here that basically blocks, they may say, problems, but regardless of what the problems are, what the issues are, and whatever, there has to be a way. They have to find a way to normalize. I think that's the bottom line. And then, of course, I have my suggestion that I will share with you that how that could be done. But the bottom line, again, I think the American strategic interest toward Iran should focus on normalizing relations as opposed to just destroying the country.
Well, this is your long-held position on Iran-US interactions and dealings, but the issue with Iran, I think you have to bear in mind that the Iranian regime, for all intents and purposes, is a failed regime. It is collapsing on itself without any foreign intervention or any, coup d'etat staged by the Americans or anything else. It is in itself doomed to fail. So the issue is, what would be the incentive for the Americans to try to normalize relations with a state which is deeply, deeply unpopular and which has failed on every level of governance? Every level of governance. So why would the Americans want to have normal relations with such a state?
Well, the issue is not with such a state, is with such a country. Yes, I agree with you that Iran is now controlled by the Islamic Republic, and the state is in trouble domestically and internationally, and it has a hard time to manage its life. But beyond Iran, beyond the regime in Iran, there is, of course, 92 million people. It's a country that is the eighth most richest nation on the earth. It's a very rich country, from minerals to oil and gas to human resources to geography to history to culture, and 92 million consumer. And on top of it, a tremendous deficit for investment in every aspect. in the economy and elsewhere. So I think you have to go beyond the regime and think in terms of the country. Now, if the regime is collapsing, then obviously there will be a time sooner or later that that regime will be replaced. Someone else will have. No country on the earth can live without without a country, without a government. Regardless of what happens to the Islamic Republic, Iran will have a governing body. Again, remnants of this regime, the militaries, or some other forces, the country is going to be there, and that country will have a governing body. So I think the United States should take a longer view, a more strategic and comprehensive view. We say, okay, listen, I will go toward negotiation for normalization, but in the middle of it, this regime collapses. So, but the Iran is there. Someone else will take over, will continue. The thing is that even if the US is going to say, okay, no, I'm going to push towards regime change and get rid of this regime without being concerned about the future, then again, it's the same old strategy that even if you get the regime destroyed, you still have to get the country back. How will you get that back? Either you want to put your puppet on top of that, or you do something different than in the past. You know, back in 1953, American went and overthrew a prime minister that was quite democratic and replaced it with its own people or person, the Shah. But since then, just over 80 years, the Americans have been paying for it. Believe me, what Americans have paid for that coup is, I go in trillions after trillions. It has cost them a lot because that coup didn't have a long view of Iran, of a long view of the country, of its culture, its way of life and people. It just imposed. Well, American go and impose another one. But again, they will have again problem for another 100 years to come. So I think the right way for the US is don't get into the regime change. See if you can normalize relation with this regime and let the Iranian people take care of the regime. Let them decide what to do with the regime. Let the opposition do. Even if you were to help the opposition, you have to be careful. You have to be on the side of the Iranian people, on the side of the right people. That I have always said, continue to say, the best friend of America is an Iranian nationalist. The best friend of the United States is an Iranian nationalist. Unfortunately, the coup back in 1953 was based on the assumption that the most inimical to the US interest is an Iranian nationalist. So they went against the nationalism, they went against socialism, against, the left, the progressives, and of course they ended up with 1953 coup. 1953 coup and then 1979 revolution. Again, right? If the US wanted to do regime change, which I don't believe US should do it that way, that it is trying to with the war and sanctions, it should do it in a way that it will help the nationalists to be
Okay,
in power.
Doctor, I'm going to come back to that, and I want to mention a lot of other articles which have been printed over the last 12 hours. But with your rationale, if back in the 80s, The Medellin cartel had managed to gain control of Colombia. Pablo Escobar had become the president of Colombia, and he had his empire of drug running. Would you have given the same advice to the United States that you should seek to normalize with the Medellin cartel, and then let the Colombians decide whether they want to overthrow the cartel or bring up the Kelly cartel against the Medellin cartel, because it's the same situation. I think there's a difference between the coup d'etat and today, and that is Prime Minister Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh was a man of the people. He was revered in the country by intellectuals, by all classes of life. But today, the regime is despised by the people, even more than how Escobar was seen in Colombia. In fact, in Colombia, Escobar was quite popular because he helped the poor. But this regime has pretty much made every middle class Iranian poor and has deprived them of standard of living that Iranians were acquainted to. So how could that serve the United States? Or how could that be long term?
Well, I mean, remember, Escobar came back after Maduro was hijacked and taken out. And so, in a way, that was the stage one of the American coup in Venezuela. And this is the second stage of that coup. And again, uh, okay, I leave this for the Venezuelan people to decide, but I don't believe that's the way to go in any country, including Venezuela or Iran. But then again, the Trump government administration is thinking a little bit differently these days. I wanted to go back to Iran and say, regardless of what you think about the regime, I think if that regime is so bad and if the people are so against it, if that regime is so illegitimate, then it shouldn't be difficult for the people to change it, to change it. And I don't believe the American help will be useful in a way in this particular case, as it wasn't back in 1953. Although in, you may say that in 1953, U.S. went against the democratic prime minister. Here, he may go against a dictatorship. Yes, but at the end of the day, it is a foreign intervention. And that will be seen as a foreign intervention and it will backfire, I believe. You know, back
Okay,
in
I don't
1950,
support foreign intervention. I
what
don't
I'm
support
saying is, I know you
normalization either.
don't. Now, I
Well,
know you don't. What I'm saying is, I believe the United States interfered in the Iranian Revolution 1979, forced the Shah out, and forced the army to become neutral and so on. That was a wrong approach. Even if the US intervened against a dictator and for a revolution, the end result came to be the same, that it didn't serve neither Iranians, even if the US went against the dictator in that country, and it didn't serve the United States either. I think it is in the nature of the foreign intervention that at the end of the day, it is counterproductive. There's
I agree with you.
absolutely no way that foreign intervention can be productive for any country.
I agree with you, Doctor. I'm not for foreign intervention. I don't want the United States to intervene in Iran militarily or otherwise. What I'm saying is, you're calling for normalization with a regime which is hugely despised in Iran. I'm not calling for intervention, but normalization is also a kind of intervention.
Now,
What would that be the message to the Iranian public? This regime has killed thousands and thousands of Iranians, and now we're going to normalize with it. Well, obviously, it's going to turn the
because
Iranian street,
the
which is
soon,
Pan
yeah,
American street,
Mr.
into,
Manzarpour, the
yes,
sooner you normalize, the least people will be killed.
I think we're
Let
past
me
that.
again, the sooner you normalize, the less people will be killed. Let me tell you one thing. I
What about
went to
people who've been killed already?
but listen, almost 40 years ago, I started this normalization talk and thought. Everybody was against me. No, we could not normalize. If you normalize, the Islamic Republic will survive and become more dictatorship and so on. Well, past 40 years, we still are where we are. There is no relationship, and every day more people are killed, and every day more people, okay, despise the regime, and the regime is harder. Again, just think about it. If for any magic reason I could normalize US-Iran relation 40 years ago, believe me, the people would have been in better position to fight back with any dictator as they did with the Shah of Iran, and the regime wouldn't probably be there to begin with. Listen, the Shah of Iran had a great normal relation with the United States, and it collapsed because of that normal relations. Normal relation does not increase your staying power. In fact, history has shown that normal relation with the US reduces your staying power, as it did with the Latin American dictators and the Shah of Iran and others, including the dictators in East Europe. Remember, East Europe were all had normal relation with the US, and they collapsed under that very normal relation. Shah collapsed under that normal relation. All the dictators in Latin America were disappeared under the normal relation with the US. Again, it does not mean that America does not promote dictatorship. It does, but at the same time, there is something in American relationship with other countries that melts dictators as well. This is the lesson of history. In fact, you cannot find a single country in the world over the last 200 years, not 200 years, of active American diplomacy. You cannot find a country that did not have diplomatic relation with the United States and became democratic. In the absence of diplomatic relation with the United States, no country has ever become democratic. It does not mean that if you have normal relation with the US, you will automatically be democratic. No. It will, however, create a necessary condition for democratic process. So it is a necessary condition, even if it is not a sufficient condition. So again, I believe the sooner the Islamic Republic and the United States establish diplomatic relation, the faster Iran becomes democratic, the faster the regime Iran will collapse, and the faster the people will have in a better position, and less people will be killed and destroyed. Period. I want someone to give me another logic. Historically, in experience, I don't know uh, anything. Just give me an evidence of anything that shows animosity, not having relation with the United States, has produced a better government, a more democratic government, or even a more I don't know, economically developed country. No, it doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. If you don't have relation with the US, forget about economic development, forget about democracy, period. In the US relation with dictators may serve them for some time, just it served the Shah of Iran. But after a while, it destroys them. It is no, for it is for a good reason that the Khamenei regime doesn't want a normal relation with the US. That is the reason. Khamenei knows, I'm going to speak about that in a second. Khamenei knows that diplomatic relation with the United States doesn't promote his cause. Exact the opposite. Unfortunately, the opposition to the regime doesn't understand it. For 40 years, they misunderstood and they talked nonsense, complete nonsense.
How do you assess the balance inside the US policy establishment between maximum pressure advocates and proponents of a renewed diplomacy?
I believe there has always been, I have been 40 years in US-Iran relation, there has always been a group, very strong group, for normalization of relation, for better relation, for economic ties, and the rest of it. Of course, there have always been a group of very, very tough warmongers, neoconservatives, and you call them, that did not want that to happen. Unfortunately, that conservatives have served that they have served the Islamic Republic. They have not served the United States of America. They took George Bush to the war in Iraq, Trump, then Obama to the war with Libya, but they gained what? Absolutely zero. They just made America lose. America lose. I think we have to listen to the voices of reason in this country who are for good relation, for normalization, and we have to stand against those forces that are for war, sanctions, and so on, and show them that their approach has not really served America. They have just cost America in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, everywhere, and they will do the same in Iran. That's not the way to go.
This brings me to my next question, and that is foreign policy suggests Washington is weighing a spectrum of military measures alongside diplomacy. Could you elaborate on how Iran interprets these mixed signals, especially given recent internal protests and regime priorities?
Well, the Islamic Republic has a long history, but pressure, military threats and diplomatic interactions with the United States is not new. You remember the Islamic Republic had a war with the US we call the Tankers War in during the war with Iraq. It was a serious war, the Tanker War. So, and there was another war just 3.5 months ago. There could be another war coming in a few more months or few more weeks. These are not new. At the same time, there has been tens of diplomatic interactions, negotiations, agreements, and so on. And over there was the JCPOA. They cooperated for overthrowing Saddam. They cooperated over overthrowing the Taliban in Afghanistan, and so many times. So these two countries have experience on both sides, war and peace. But the problem is this. Let me put it this way. Around 17 years ago, I wrote a white paper for the Obama administration. It is still on the American Iranian Council's website. It's called AIC White Paper. I wrote with a group of my colleagues, American colleagues, this paper with a shuttle diplomacy back between Washington and Tehran. We finalized it, and the bottom line of our thesis, and it still is my thesis, I never gave up on that. I will never give up. And that's the only way to go. I said the problem between the United States and Iran from a policy side, the policy problem between US and Iran is that both sides have been willing to maintain what I called a no war, no peace status quo. No war, no peace. Anytime we are toward the war, we will cap it. We would immediately, make it the least or go away. If there is a peace process, we will not let it go for the normalization. No war, no peace has been the Satan in US-Iran relation. I call it a Satan. Unfortunately, the Islamic Republic, Mr. Khamenei, used this Satan to its best interest. Using this no war, no peace policy, it was able to maintain a status quo that neither would go to war nor to peace. Unfortunately, American, Israelis, and the West also agreed to maintain that status quo. Until recently, the official US policy was also toward Iran, no war, no peace. Back in 17 years ago, I told the Obama administration, if you wanted to cut off and get to somewhere with the Islamic Republic, you must first take that no war and no peace status quo off the table. You make a speech, tell Mr. Khamenei, unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, and I went through that reason, we could go through it today. For us, the American, this state of no war, no peace doesn't serve our national interest. We are losing from it, and we don't want to maintain this no war, no peace status quo with you or with Iran, doesn't matter. Moving forward, I have two options for you only on the table. War, peace. In the middle, there is no option. No war, no peace, and so on. War, peace.
Well, I think that's what President Trump is conveying to Tehran.
That's right. That is what Obama didn't agree, accepted it. Trump has accepted that same white paper. The white paper says, it is very simple. There is a problem with Mr. Trump, I have to say. In the white paper, we say, it's very simple. We say that no war, no peace is taken off the table. There is war or peace on the table. And then we say, America will tell Iran that you can, it is your decision which way you want to go. If you want to war, we go to war. If you want to go for peace, we go for peace. And we say, Mr. Obama then will tell Iran, if you take peace, then I will give you a big carrot. That would be my cost. I will take sanctions. I will normalize, but the condition of peace, the definition of peace is diplomatic relations. Peace means I send my ambassador to Tehran and you send your ambassador to Washington. There is no other definition. for peace here. If you wanted to go for the peace, and we are there, we will help you, we will establish relation, we will take the sanctions off, and whatever problem we have between us, it will be discussed between the ambassadors, between the two countries that have normal relations, like the Soviet Union and the United States. But if you don't want to take it, then we will go for war. Mr. Obama's administration called me, and I've been so many times to the State Department to explain. The problem at the end of the day said, Houshang is very dangerous. What if the Islamic Republic was to take the war option? And I said, if you had a small little mind, a little brain in your head, you wouldn't think that. How can you think that the Islamic Republic will take war option with you? You must be out of your mind. What kind of superpower you are? But in any case, they decided to go back to the no war, no peace. The JCPOA is the Obama formula for no war, no peace status quo. In fact, JCPOA was built on the idea of maintaining no war, no peace. It was not built on the idea of making peace. No war, no peace. The JCPOA was designed to maintain that status quo, and that is why Mr. Trump didn't go for it. Because Mr. Trump, as opposed to Mr. Obama, wanted war or peace. Mr. Trump, the day Mr. Trump left JCPOA, he made a short speech. In that speech, he said, I am leaving JCPOA, but I am gonna to open the door for Iran to negotiations. And then he said, comprehensive, direct negotiations toward normalization of relations and expansion of economic interactions. That is what Mr. Trump said. Of course, Tehran didn't take it. Tehran didn't take it. Thereafter, Mr. Trump went and killed Mr. Soleimani and the rest of the story until this last war and so on. The bottom line, what I'm saying is, Mr. Khamenei, and now I'm going to talk to Mr. Khamenei. Mr. Khamenei has maintained this no war, no peace for some 40 years between himself and the US, between Iran and the US. For whatever reason, we can talk about it. That status quo is no longer stable. It is no longer what you call it. It cannot be continued. It just can't be kept between the two nations. I believe for all many, in fact, reasons we could talk about, the status quo doesn't work anymore. Moving forward, Mr. Khamenei should really understand this. It has only two options, particularly with this Mr. Trump. Either war or peace. There is no another option. You can go to Masrat, you can go to any place, you could create 10 more JCPOA, wouldn't work. The time JCPOA worked is gone. The no war, no peace is no longer even acceptable by the Iranian people. The maximum number of Iranians, the majority of Iranians don't want a no war, no peace. Some openly want war, and others, of course, want a normalization. No one want a no war, no peace. In the United States also, I believe, almost nobody is talking about no war, no peace. A group of people are pushing for war and another pushing for diplomacy. That's the future. War or diplomacy, and diplomacy doesn't mean just negotiation like JCPOA. Diplomacy means comprehensive, direct negotiations toward normalization of relations and economic cooperation. And the normalization means exchange of ambassadors, or at least at some level of consulate. There is no other way. Anybody, if you think, for example, anybody that thinks that US should not normalize with the US, you are, whether you like it or not, you are asking for war. You are asking for war. Most people don't realize that when they say US should not normalize with this regime. I say, okay, what else? Then you don't have any option. Either war or no war, no peace. And I say, both of them are wrong. That is why normalization is the only correct way for both nations.
Professor, I wanted to go beyond your rationale for normalizing with the United States at this moment. But just today we had the news that unfortunately a young Iranian man committed suicide. In his suicide note, he asked President Trump to stop negotiations with the Islamic Republic and not move towards normalization. So, because this is a long program, I'm going to take the liberty to challenge you a bit on your assumption. Your assumption basically is that no country has achieved democracy without normal relations with the United States.
Yes.
Factually and historically, this is inaccurate. If we look at democratic transition in Portugal in 1974 in the Carnation Revolution, the transition was driven by military officers and civil society. The US did not normalize something to produce democracy. Relations already existed, but Washington was not an engine of democratization. Domestic factors were decisive. Also, if we look at South Korea, South Korea democratized in 1987 after mass protests. The US had relations with the regime while it was an authoritarian regime for decades. Normalization didn't cause democracy. In fact, Washington supported the dictator for strategic reasons during the Cold War. Democratization was driven by internal mobilization. The core logic that you're posing is correlation, causation, and strategic convenience. But this doesn't apply to many of the countries that the United States has normal relations with, like Saudi Arabia, which isn't democratic, Egypt, which isn't democratic, UAE, which isn't democratic. They all have normal relations with Washington. So I don't see any correlation.
You did not
I don't see
listen
any
to me.
correlation between having normal relations with the United States and democratization. And I don't think that at this stage, after all the bloodshed, after all the brutality, normalizing with the Iranian regime would send the right message to the Iranian public.
Yeah. First, let me correct you on Portugal and South Korea. I think you got it wrong. In Portugal, US had relationship, and then there was a revolution. And then they cut, because Americans don't like revolution, they cut off relation, and then they established. So, in fact, US had relationship with Portugal when the coup happened.
I actually mentioned that. I said it was not.
So therefore, that is my theory. In fact, that is my theory. You were talking, I don't know what you were talking about. I said US when have relationship with a country, they could go to war, like in Iran, with exactly what happened in Iran. The Shah of Iran was a dictator, had relation with the US. There was a revolution, except that in Portugal, the revolution was by military and became a democratic revolution. In Iran, it was a religious, and it became counter-revolutionary. But in both cases, my idea is right. In South Korea, America had diplomatic ties with this military, with these generals for 19 years before they collapsed. And they collapsed exactly in the same way that the Shah of Iran collapsed, that America forced the generals to accept certain terms. And that country became democratic. And then US relation was never cut off with them. They continued. So again, and then finally, I think you misunderstood me. I was very clear. I said diplomatic ties. I said two things as my hypothesis, which has been proven. One, you cannot find a single country that did not have diplomatic relation with the US and have become democratic. I did not say you cannot find a single country that did not have relation with the US and didn't have revolution, for example, or coup d'etat. I didn't say that. I said there is no country on the earth that did not have diplomatic ties with the US and then became democratic while that the diplomatic tie didn't exist. That was hypothesis number one. Hypothesis number two, I said, diplomatic ties does not mean that those countries will automatically become democratic. It means that diplomatic ties is a necessary condition, but it is not a sufficient condition. That is to say, if you don't have diplomatic ties with the US, forget about democracy. Period. No country has ever become democratic while that country did not have diplomatic ties with the US. Forget about it. But if you have diplomatic ties, then you can hope that at some point, the very America will destroy its own dictator, just like in the Shah, like with Pinochet, like with many other dictators. In terms of Saudi Arabia and Egypt, yes, that's my theory. Saudi Arabia is not a democratic country because, but because it has relation with the US, I could promise you, Saudi Arabia will become much sooner a democratic nation than Iran, which doesn't have diplomatic ties. Egypt has a dictator general. I could promise you that dictatorship will become faster, sooner democratic than the Islamic Republic, because the Islamic Republic doesn't have the necessary condition. And the necessary condition is that relationship. But again, it is not the sufficient condition. You have to, after diplomatic ties, you have to create sufficient conditions for democratic change. So none of your examples really reject my arguments. None. They are exactly the same way, except that you misheard me. I never said that diplomatic ties with the US will make you democratic. I said it is a necessary condition, but it is not a sufficient condition.
Professor, now I want to move on to BBC World Service reporting on the protests and crackdown, which has come out today. The BBC and multiple independent estimates point to thousands, possibly tens of thousands, killed in nationwide protests against the regime. Internet blackouts and repressions have made accurate reporting difficult. How has the scale and intensity of the 2025-2026 protests affected the Islamic Republic's political legitimacy and its strategic calculus towards foreign policy, especially in negotiations with the US?
Unfortunately, tremendously, of course, has damaged the Islamic Republic, its legitimacy. As I said, in Iran, there are basically, except for the regime and its very close people, there are two groups, one group, one war, the other one's normalization, period. And I believe 90% of the Iranian people want normalize. I believe they want. I would be absolutely shocked if you were to put this question to the Iranian people saying, okay, we have two options, normalize relation with the US or go to war with the US. I will be absolutely shocked that the absolute majority will not go for normalization. That has been the case. Now, that is despite the fact that Iranians are so angry and upset, and some of them don't want a normalization. But the problem with this group is they don't understand that in the absence of normalization, either you have the condition as is, or you have a war. There isn't the third alternative. The war, in their belief, will bring their people to power. Maybe. I am not sure. Or, I don't know. Normalization, they may think, some of them, they think that the regime will increase its staying power. I am not sure. History doesn't show that normalization increases the staying power of regimes. It reduces. With the US, I mean. So, see, the people who are looking for war, I am not sure they are thinking about what they are saying. Okay, you want a war. What you want to gain from war? Of course, they want a regime change. All right, let's assume for a while that you can change the regime with the US. Then what you get is what happened in Libya or what happened in Iraq. Is that what you want? They think in the case of Iran, the regime change will be very clean, that a guy will be from outside put on the crown and everything will be just perfect. Unfortunately, that mindset is sick. That's a sick mindset. It doesn't understand, it doesn't think, it's only, that mindset is only what you call a revengist. It is only a mindset of a sick person that just think in terms of violence. I don't know what else they wanted to achieve. What it is that they wanted to achieve with war, with Iran. Nobody has calculated that, the cost of it, the possibility of what may happen because of this war. Again, let me go back. I understand that the people are angry, the regime has killed so many people, that people wanted the regime change and all that. I understand that. But the problem is, what alternative is there? The alternative, of course, will be another revolution. It could be an Iraqization or Libyanization of Iran, or I don't know, it could be, I don't know what it could be, a coup by the militarists. See, I don't know what it is that people are looking for. This is the last war the Pahlavi is returning. See, that is so, it is that propaganda is so childish, so unrealistic and unserious, that makes people laugh. Listen, that's not the point, Mr. Manzarpour, is to think clear and true the issue. I want relation between US and normalized, even with this regime. And at the same time, I'm telling you, go ahead and overthrow the regime. If you can, go ahead, be my guest. I am not going to say, don't go and overthrow the regime. My position is the best way to deal with this Islamic Republic, as I said 40 years ago, was to establish tie with it. And then at the end of the day, the Islamic Republic will be facing the same destiny that the Shah of Iran faced, which was the best friend of the United States. Now, you for 40 years went against me, against normalization. The question, what should you gain? What did you gain by opposing normalization and opposing my approach? What did you do? You were able to overthrow the regime. You were able to democratize the regime. You were able to even reform the regime. No, none of the above. Every day, this regime has gone to the other direction. Less reform, less democratic, more dictatorial, more killing, and so on. So I am trying to understand these people that for 40 years have tried, America and the Israelis, to overthrow the regime for them and opposing the normalization. What they have gained? Do they want another 40 more years? The question is, do they want another 40 more years, even 10 more years, even 5 more years, the way it is? I don't know what it is that they want. The man, I wish him the best. Okay, the one that who killed himself. I'm very sorry for him. But he didn't think right. So he killed himself for what? For the cause of war? Is that a good cause to die for? I am not sure. I sympathize with the family, but the man wasn't thinking right. If I was him, if I one day was to put myself on fire in the middle of Tehran, I will put myself on fire for peace, not for war. I put the war, ask US to come and hit the Islamic Republic. So what it solves? It kills a lot of people. A war between US and Iran, it will kill at least from 300 to probably 500,000 people. We are not joking here. I'm shocked with the way they are thinking. They think this is a joke. They think this is just a play, a game. The American come and have a war and the Islamic Republic goes away, and then their people come, everything is democratic. I just can't understand these people. There must be a reason, there must be an experience behind it, there must be something. I am sorry for him. I am so sorry for him to kill himself. But he killed himself for a wrong cause, for a very, very wrong cause.
Professor Amirahmadi, I think we are not addressing the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is Ayatollah Khamenei. He has issued a statement which was broadcast on Iranian television in which, to mark the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, and in this statement, he has once again emphasized about the external threat that America poses and his ideological commitment to oppose American hegemony. How does this rhetoric reconcile with Iran's engagement in diplomacy with the United States? I mean, your formula would only work if Khamenei was willing to take it. And it doesn't seem to be the case here.
Yeah, again, Khamenei will never take the no war, no peace off the table. I was talking to the American to take that no war, no peace off the table. I know Mr. Khamenei will never take no war, no peace off the table. He, in the speech you just spoke, that is the no war, no peace speech. Diplomacy on threat, that is no war, no peace speech. There is absolutely no hope, as far as I am concerned, from my part at least, that Mr. Khamenei will ever take no war, no peace off the table voluntarily. What I was talking since Obama's administration to today is that the America must take the no war, no peace off the table and give Mr. Khamenei a clear two approach, war or peace, and let Mr. Khamenei decide. But no war, no peace has to be taken off the table before you can give the war or peace approach. I think America should take the no war, no peace off the table. The problem with Trump is, in my white paper, I will tell Mr. Obama, take the no war, no peace off the table, put war here and peace in the other side, and tell the Iranian regime, if you take the war, be it, let me fight. If you wanted to take the peace, we are for it. And if you take the peace, not only we are for it, but we even pay a price for it because we are peaceful. We want a normalization of relation. We will take economic sanctions off. We will normalize relation. We will send ambassadors. We will expand automatic ties, economic ties, and so on. And let Mr. Khamenei decide. Just think for a second. Just think for a second that Mr. Trump tomorrow makes a speech and says, Mr. Khamenei, moving forward, we have two alternatives in our relation, war or peace. If you wanted to take the war, my military machineries are all there. Let's go for it, and I will go for it. If you were to take the peace, Mr. Khamenei, I will start a comprehensive, direct negotiation toward normalization. And in the meantime, I will take off most economic sanctions off the table. I will let Iranian people to enjoy a better life. I will let the American companies come to invest. Think about it. Mr. Khamenei will say, no, I wouldn't take this peace. I will not take this peace. Can Mr. Khamenei not take that peace? No. Mr. Khamenei will not be able to take the war if Tehran, if Washington was to make it very, very clear. Unfortunately, our problem is not with Mr. Khamenei. I know for a fact that he doesn't want to take no war, no peace off the table. The no war, no peace serves him. It is the American side. The ball is in the American court. America, if America wants to have diplomatic ties or war, it has to very openly, clearly, transparently communicate and be prepared for either side. And I don't see any option.
Well, that's the point we have to end with. Professor Amirahmadi, thank you for your candid and substantive conversation. Tonight's debate really comes down to a fundamental question. Does diplomacy follow the normalization with great powers or from internal transformation within societies? History shows us that diplomacy can open doors, reduce tensions, and even create space. But it also shows that external normalization alone does not manufacture democratic institutions, nor does it automatically weaken entrenched authoritarian structures. In Iran's case, the real issue may not simply be whether Washington and Tehran normalize relations, but whether such normalization would empower citizens or consolidate the existing power hierarchy. That tension remains unsolved, and it is one of the defining strategic questions facing Iran today. Thank you again for joining us. Till next time, goodbye.